Hey guys, thanks for joining me today. I want to talk to you about tinnitus today, what's causing it, what drives it, the neurology of it, the structure of it, and also what you can do to go about sorting it out, because there are tips and tricks. You don't necessarily need to live with tinnitus. I'm Trevor Jacuti. Thanks for joining me in. Thanks for joining me on our channel. Please, if you're watching us and you love our stuff, like, share, and contribute by posting up comments. All this stuff keeps us motivated to keep us getting you more content, which helps you even more. If you don't like this long format of videos, jump onto our Facebook page and check out our 2-minute snippets where we get through things really quickly and give you just the relevant stuff. But anyway, for today I want to talk to you about tinnitus and go through it in some detail so you can truly understand what this condition actually is. For those who aren't quite up to speed with tinnitus, what we're really talking about is that buzzing and whistling that you get in your ears. Sometimes it happens after a rock concert when you've been into this loud kind of auditorium, when you walk away and your ears just tend to buzz. Other times it's after being using high-end machinery for long periods of time, and other times it just seems to happen out of nowhere. And I want to talk about why all these things happen and what you can do about trying to get your life back on track with them. Alright, so a couple of things we need to understand. Firstly, it's a buzzing or a whistling. It can have different levels of pitch. Some people will hear it down or low like a computer fan. Other people will hear it really high like a buzzing kind of or chirping bird type noise that keeps happening non-stop. Age is a big factor for it. So what we do understand is as we get older, people do tend to get more predisposed to getting tinnitus as well. So age can be a factor. It's not very common in young kids. It gets more common as we get older and older. And as I alluded to before, there are both structural and neurological causes for it. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an introduction. We're not going to go heavy into the neurology, but I'm going to give you a little bit of an introduction into that and what we're seeing with it. Alright, so let's have a look at the hearing or the auditory complex to begin with, to give you some insights with what's happening. There's a few key things here that we see that are really important for us. So the first one here, this is your ear itself. This is where the sound waves actually come in. So sound has a vibratory frequency, so it's an up and down oscillation. And that vibration produces this movement in air. That movement in air gets channeled into our externatory audio canal. That then hits a membrane, which you commonly hear called your eardrum. That drum vibrates, and as it vibrates like that, it creates movement, and it's moving in accordance to these sound waves that are coming in. That actually causes these complex small bones here to rattle and oscillate, and they push onto a smaller membrane here, which is what transmits the information into the nerve and into your brain. So what your brain receives is not sound, it receives frequencies of vibration, which it actually then converts to sound. That gives us our experience of sound. Okay? The interesting thing with this process, so we've got this sound wave coming in here, going through these bones, getting pushed, and then going along up this nerve. Okay? The interesting thing about this, which is very intriguing from a design perspective, is that we also have a balance mechanism within our ears as well. And what it basically does is it acts kind of like a series of hula hoops that sit vertically, horizontally, pointing forward and backwards. And what they do, if you can imagine a little ball inside a hula hoop, as you rotate the hula hoop, the ball moves, and this is the way our brain basically works out where our head is in space. So as I tilt my head down, the ball rolls forward. As I tilt my head back, it rolls a different way. If I turn left and right, it spins in another direction. Now, we don't have those little balls inside those canals, but we do have fluid movement. And those fluid movement is picked up by little hairs. And interestingly, it's also sent down the same nerve. And this could be really important for us, because quite often what happens is that the frequency of one nerve may influence the frequency of another. So this is why a lot of people will tend to get dizzy when they have hearing problems, and likewise quite often people start developing things like tinnitus when they're having balance problems as well. So we've got a whole lot of different influences going on here through this auditory system. Now, one of the things we need to understand is once we're trying to convert this vibration into an electrical signal, we have all these tiny little hairs. So imagine that we have a church organ, a big pipe organ. We have really long pipes that produce very deep, heavy sounds. And then we have all these small little pipes that produce the sharp, high-pitched sounds. Okay? Same thing happens as the air, or I should say as the vibration moves through these areas. The slow, big, long vibrations are picked up by the big, long hairs, and the high-pitched, fast vibrations are picked up by the small hairs. And each of these hairs then sends an electrical signal down the nerve to inform the brain what's happening. And just like any other aspect of the human body, they can fatigue and become tired. So when we go to a loud event, whether it be a rock concert or something like this, and they're constantly having to go all the time, they can fatigue that area out, and then that creates deficits as well that can be just temporarily lived, but not always temporary. So that's a basic introduction to how all this system works. Once we cross through here though, we have signals sent to various aspects of the brain. One of the big areas that picks up that information though is your brain stems. This is the lower part of the brain before you get into this big area here. So this is what we're talking about in this section through here, this bottom area, brain stem. And there's a whole lot of these different areas that deal with that. But amongst these are these little balls at the back here called your colliculi that have a huge impact on how you perceive sound and where that sound goes. Okay? So from here, it gets picked up and it gets sent to different areas of the brain. It goes out to your cerebellum, out to the temporal lobe, through the central part, up to the top. There's a whole lot of different expansions, and we're not going to go into all those different areas where it travels. But we want to talk about this little area of the brainstem itself, because this area where that sound goes into is also your flight or fight centers. Okay, and this is a really important section. So coming into this area here as well, we have input coming from your face. We have input coming from your jaw. We have input coming from your neck. We have input coming from your eyes. We have detection of blood oxygen. So when our oxygen levels are low, that's all picked up into that area as well. We also have inputs coming from our balance centers. We have sensory input coming from the body. There's a whole lot of different areas that are sending information into that area as well. And like we said before with that nerve, and how because the two aspects of the nerve sit next to each other, they influence each other, the same thing happens through this area here as well. So for example, you may find that when you have problems with the jaw after you've been to your dentist, or if you bite on something, your jaw cracks, that you start developing your tinnitus. And yes, there are structural reasons for that in terms of muscles from the jaw also supplying or controlling that membrane itself that we spoke about, that eardrum. But the other aspect of it as well is that input from your jaw over here, that input is also traveling right into that area. And that can wind that whole area up and stimulate it, and also affect those hearing mechanisms. Okay, so one of the key things we do know about tinnitus is quite often associated with a neural excitatory problem. So an overstimulation of certain areas of the brain, and our arousal rates in the brain really are greatly driven by this area of our brain stem. So a lot of the ways that we can help calm tinnitus down to begin with is just to start actually winding down our own stimulation from the brain. So how can we do that? There's lots of different ways we can do that. We can do that from making sure we have good blood oxygen levels. We can do that by making sure our eyes are not being overexposed to bright lights, so things like spending too much time on technology. We can do that by making sure we've got good TMJ function. We can do that by making sure that our balance mechanisms are working right. There's a whole lot of different ways that we have into that complex, which are really, really, really important. All right, so let's move on a little bit here. So when we look at the human brain itself, it's a very complex system. Now, if we go back to our image we had before of our pipes, so our big pipes down into our small pipes, into our little pipes, sometimes what we understand is that the more things vibrate, the more signals they need to send, and therefore the more sensitive they are to fatigue. So if you're in a loud environment all the time, so let's say you work with machinery that's very, very loud, you're not using ear protection, you can start fatiguing this high end, and the result is these little hairs in your ears can start breaking down. And now when they break down, the result is that you just can't pick up those frequencies anymore. You just can't hear that high-end frequency. And this is what we now understand to be industrial deafness. I'm going to get to why this is important in tinnitus in a second. But the other thing we understand with this as well is that we also have these brain-related changes going on because we're sending those signals out to all those different areas of your brain itself. So all these nerves that are coming in from the face and coming into this brainstem that we just spoke about are all potentially influencing that hearing system as well. If we get really, really closely to that auditory nerve that's coming in that we spoke about, this is what we call our vestibulocochlear nerve. This nerve, as we said before, has two sections. It's like a divider. It has two sections that come in and go out. And part of this is your balance, and part of this is your hearing. And likewise, when it goes into the brainstem as well, we have hearing and balance, which sit right next to each other and also potentially influence each other. So there are conditions such as Meniere's disease, where we have changes in fluid movements within the canals of the ear itself, which quite commonly cause problems with hearing and quite commonly cause problems with tinnitus as a result. So that's one of the first conditions that we have. And there's ways that this can potentially be managed as well. But we need to start understanding that there is structural reasons why we can have tinnitus, and these structural reasons, there's not a lot we can actually do about them. You've got industrial deafness and we're developing tinnitus as a result, there's not a lot we can do. Well, if we're talking about neurological change, there's often ways that we can influence it. All right, so let's look at what's actually happening here. So we go back to our concept of sound being a frequency that's going up and down. This is what's picked up on our system. We need to remember that this frequency up and down is not just happening one off. This is happening at each of those hairs. So the high end, small hairs are sending frequencies back like this, and our big long hairs are sending frequency back similar to this. Okay, so they're all sending information back to the brain about what the eardrum is actually picking up from the environment. Okay. We also have frequencies that go way above the hairs that we have up here. Yeah, so frequencies that vibrate higher than the smallest of hairs can actually pick up. Likewise, we have frequencies that are slower than the biggest hairs can pick up. So for the average human being, somewhere between 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz is all that we can actually hear. So if we have sound that drops below 20 hertz, this is sound that you tend to feel, like a big, heavy, booming bass that you tend to feel but not necessarily hear. Likewise, once we get up above 20 kilohertz, we can't hear them either, and sometimes we don't even know that they exist. And there's some really cool programs that you can use, even on apps on phone and the like, where you can put high-end frequencies above 20 kilohertz into them, and the speakers will actually produce that vibration, and the kids will hear it, but the adults won't. Really cool. So we know that these things change as we get older. And this is where you have dog whistles that dogs can hear that humans can't either, because of this frequency pattern that we have. So when we're looking at tinnitus, what we're really looking at is the brain is expecting a broad range of frequencies coming into it all the time. Now, when we have something like industrial deafness and we lose a section of that, what we really have is the brain tries to turn up, and this is a bit oversimplified, but the brain tends to turn up the microphone at that level to try and pull in more vibration, to become more sensitive to that vibration so it can hear it and get a full spectrum of noise. The problem with that is, just like when you take a microphone and you put it close to a speaker, this generates reverb. And this reverb, just like when you hear at with someone who's speaking on a microphone at a presentation or something and you get that whistling effect, this is exactly what we start hearing. Okay? So quite often this whole issue that we have with tinnitus comes about because we're actually losing sections of our hearing. Can be a very big reason for it. And there's a big reason for industrial deafness causing tinnitus as well, and that stuff is very, very hard to deal with. The more common stuff we're talking about though are frequencies that are not being sent through very effectively to the brain because the nerve itself can't vibrate effectively, and the biggest cause of that is inflammation within the nerve itself or in local areas, or otherwise brain processing problems of those signals. And these are the ones that we can really often do things about. So how can we deal with this? All right, for the first one, if we go and look at our balance. So we look at balance itself. If we know there's an issue with the balance, the first thing we can always do is improve balance, okay? And there's a lot of different ways that you can do this. There's specific vestibular rehabilitation programs. We've got our own specific way here that we've developed that we're starting to research now that seems to be very effective in dealing with this type of stuff. There's also specific rehabilitation programs you can use even at home. So the old Wii board and the Wii console used to have some amazing ways of improving balance and giving feedback just by playing games on the Wii with a balance platform, which was absolutely amazing, and we wish that that stuff had really kept going because it really was great. But this is our office here that you can see. This is our program that we use. This is our balance platform here. And in this, what we can do is, number one, we can check to see if there is a problem in balance directly, and then if there is, we can start doing these type of programs to rehabilitate it. And if we can get this right, then this is already one big step in the right direction. The other things, as we spoke about before, TMJ, so looking at jaw health. Making sure the jaw is good becomes really, really critical. The jaw has a twofold effect. Number one, we have muscular attachment to the eardrum. So we have direct structural links between the jaw and the ear. Then likewise, we also have neurological links. Remember how we spoke about before, the nerve from the ear is the same nerve that is supplying into the brainstem, it's the same area that is coming from the jaw itself. So those areas, those nerves hit the same spot in the brainstem, so they will influence each other. So TMJ function becomes really, really critical in anybody who is having tinnitus. The next one is your cervical spine or your neck, and this is also really important because they're saying inputs into those areas. They're really, really, really critical. So we need to make sure we've got good neck motion that's occurring. Hypoxia. So hypoxia is important for a lot of different reasons. This is your blood oxygen level the way that it should be? The first one's the obvious one, and that is that if our blood oxygen levels drop too low, we tend to stimulate those same areas of the nervous system that we're talking about. So we increase our flight or fight responses, which can increase neural excitation and again drive that whole mechanism. One of the other key things that we're looking at with hypoxia though is that hypoxia just generally reduces brain function itself. And the most important or the most advanced area of the brain is what we call our cortex. And this cortex is really, and the growth of it and the development of it is really what differentiates us from apes. So when we start to lose energy production, oxygenation, these type of things, we tend to go back into our default mode to a great extent, which makes us more ape-like, and we lose some of these functions. That then puts us back into a defensive flight or fight mode, and again pushes the same mechanism. This is something we commonly see as well with people who have concussion, similar type of effects where they start getting these type of issues as well. So there are three big key things that we need to look at with every single person who has tinnitus without even getting into the biochemistry as yet. But that's all clinical. But what can you do at home? All right, let's take an image back. Let's go back a little bit again. Let's go back to what we had here to our frequencies, okay? So if we have a range of frequencies, so let's say we've got this range here, so low down here at 20 kilohertz that we don't really hear very well coming up, 20 hertz, to our normal range, and then back down towards 20 kilohertz where we start dropping off again and don't hear things very much as well. If we look at our range like this, if we lose a segment, so let's say we lose this section here. Okay, the body has lifted the volume up, it increases the microphone, and we can be getting our tinnitus now at this frequency. Okay, so we can use tinnitus as a way of kind of identifying what might be going wrong in interpretation of the brain. So the key thing when we look at this and we want to try and rehabilitate this, and you can do this at home yourself, the key thing we want to look at with this, more than anything else, is what is the frequency of the tinnitus? Does your tinnitus occur at 2000 hertz, at 4000 hertz, at 8000 hertz? Where does it actually occur? You can do this any way you want, and It's better if you have a musical knowledge because you can kind of pick this up really quickly if you can understand pitch. But if you can't, that's fine. There's tons of apps that you can use. You can use frequency generators on apps from your phone, whatever it is. But you basically just need to put a set of headphones on or earphones in and just basically have the room quiet and try and hear your tinnitus. And then what you want to do is change the frequency and try and get the frequency in your phone to match the same frequency that you hear with your tinnitus. And if they can match, then what we want to do is use what we call a notch procedure. And things like Audacity, the free software, does that. We just notch out that frequency and then we start listening to it over a period of time, and that will slowly but surely fatigue that area out, and quite often is very effective at reducing tinnitus. Anyway guys, if you have any questions with how to go about using audio notch therapy, please just message me. I'm more than happy. Post it below. I can give you a whole lot more data. Don't want to overload you too much, but I just want to introduce this concept of audio notch therapy that you can use. It does work quite well at doing that. Also, I wanted to give you an understanding of all the different components that do happen neurologically. It may not just be a structural thing, and some of these things you can rectify. So there are places to go, there are things to do. If you do have questions, please just post them up in the comment section below. Get in touch with me on our social media page, and I'm always happy to help out everybody in need. Anyway guys, thanks for watching this far through. Hope you got something out of that video. If you do, please like and subscribe to our channel. Again, it helps us, it motivates us to keep us moving to produce more of these videos. And in the meantime, if you prefer just the short snippets rather than 20-odd minute videos like this, jump onto our Facebook page and check out our videos there, where we try and keep everything down to 2 minutes and just give you the point form rather than all the detail that you may not want. Anyway, catch you in the next vid. Bye for now.